Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the contents of Boris Johnson's defence dossier, which has been published today ahead of his hearing tomorrow. According to the Privileges Committee, it contains no new information at all. However, there are some interesting little sections which are worth going over. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So Boris Johnson submitted a roughly 50-page defence document to the committee yesterday. I'll be honest, I had not expected it to be published this quickly at all. I have to say. I imagine that Boris Johnson submitted it so close to the hearing so that he could then complain at the hearing itself that they were suppressing his evidence because they'd have to go through it and see if there was anything needs redacting. In the event, it seems that the document was actually extremely rushed. The committee reports that when it was first submitted to them yesterday, it contained numerous errors and typos. So Boris Johnson took his homework back and submitted a smarter version of it at 8 o'clock this morning. So the committee must have worked fairly hard to not only spot the errors yesterday, but work to get it published today. Obviously not that much in it that needed redacting. I think it was just a few names of junior officials. But I went through the document. It didn't actually take that long, given that the margins were so massive. No doubt, it first gave me the impression of in the past when I've had lazy students try and submit coursework and they try and wow you, but oh, there's loads there. And actually they've just written it in a big font with massive margins. I think there's a purpose. I think it's just so you can annotate them in this case. But it didn't take as long as I feared to read it. And I also managed to find an expert legal opinion on it as well, because obviously there'll be nuances there that I miss. Ultimately, it'll come as no surprise. What it actually is the idiot defence. It's the usual idiot defence that he's been presenting. He's basically, in his document, time after time, saying to the committee, you can't prove I'm an idiot. The committee are basically saying, look, it was obvious to everyone this was against the rules. Johnson's going, no, I'm an idiot. You can't say it's obvious for me. It's like, yeah, but even an idiot. No, I don't think you understand just how much of a colossal moron I really am. But anyway, really important. I might consider myself to have reasonable critical thinking skills. But if you want someone who can really masterfully link statements with allegations and weigh up the strength of evidence, what you need is an experienced and skilled lawyer. But before I go over some of the interesting points that a senior human rights lawyer made on Twitter, Adam Wagner, I keep trying to say Wagner. I imagine it's pronounced Wagner. He's British. But I've only ever seen it written down, so I don't know. I'll just call him Adam. But I'll go over my own thoughts first. So first of all, let's be clear. This was written by one of Boris Johnson's publicly funded lawyers, not him. His lawyers would never allow him to have written it. Second, despite Johnson's attempts at obfuscation about the allegations, it's quite clear that the author of the document understands perfectly well what the allegations are. Like there's a point in the document where it refers to a new allegation by the committee. Oh, this new allegation by the committee that I'm not an idiot. It's a complete red herring. There is no new allegation. The committee are not making any allegations, in fact. None at all. Keir Starmer made the allegations last April. MPs then ordered the committee to investigate the allegations with a view to considering if they represented a contempt of Parliament. So any suggestion that the committee are making allegations is false. It's not their job. It's not what they're doing. Their job is to investigate and decide that if the allegations are upheld, if there should be a punishment, and if so, what it should be. It's quite narrow, the range of their investigation. And if you go to the very end of the document, the final statement makes clear that the author understands what the allegations are. Because there's a claim made that the May 25th, 2022 statement to the House, which took place weeks after the inquiry was ordered. Inquiry ordered towards the end of April 2022. 25th of May, Boris Johnson makes a statement to the House where he basically admits he was lying to them. Albeit inadvertently, but that's weeks after the inquiry was ordered. Why wasn't it beforehand? And Boris Johnson reckons that constitutes a correction of the record in a timely manner. How can that be considered? How can it be considered a timely manner? Correcting the record as soon as possible if the statement was made over a month after MPs had already discovered he was lying and ordered an investigation. But anyway, enough from my thoughts for now. I'm going to have to continue my own personal thoughts on like the politics and other matters tomorrow. Was intended to talk about something else for tomorrow's first video, but, you know, should have known Boris Johnson would kick the crap out of my schedule again. So I want to refer to what an actual barrister considers to be the main points, which were not necessarily what I would have considered the main points. I'll link their whole Twitter thread in the description below if you want to read the whole thing, which I probably suggest you do. But before I go over their main point, it's not very long, by the way. It won't take long to read. But I'll go over the main points. Their conclusion is that a lot of this matter may come down to understanding the difference between law and guidance. See, there are points in Johnson's dossier where he seems to want to conflate the two, and there are other times when he relies upon there being a distinction. One of the main problems for Johnson, according to Adam, is that Johnson himself refers to one event as a party. Now, in terms of the legal sides of things and whether rules are followed, a gathering being a party or not is neither here nor there. People kept going on about a party in the media. That was mostly the Tories trying to sort of muddy the waters. The legislation didn't refer to parties. It referred to gatherings. Is it a gathering? Yeah, it's legal then. Makes no difference if a gathering could be described as a party or not. There are points in Johnson's dossier where he recounts advisers discussing whether or not something was actually a party. Legally makes no difference. Was it a gathering? Yes. Was it reasonably necessary for the purpose of work? Well, people were working. Doesn't matter. Was the gathering reasonably necessary for the purpose of doing that work? No. Then it was illegal. However, Johnson was being asked about parties in Parliament and denying that they'd taken place. He was careful not to use the word party himself. But if you're asked about parties, if MPs are using parties in the question to you and you deny that these things took place, you are still denying that a party took place whether you used the word party or not. So referring to at least one of the events himself as a party in his own evidence undermines his own evidence that he didn't know anything untoward was happening. Another problem is that Johnson himself provides an account of one of his officials telling him that he could not possibly say that all the guidance had been followed at all times. So we've got evidence that in December 2021, Johnson was told, it's his own evidence. Johnson is told by a senior official that it is not feasible to suggest that the guidance is being followed here. At that point, because Johnson's told Parliament that not just the rules, but the guidance was followed. So he should have gone back to Parliament and said, oh, look, sorry, everyone. After further discussion with my officials, I'm still of the belief that the rules were adhered to, but I can't really in good conscience say that all the guidance has been followed. Sorry about that. I'm here to correct the record. He didn't do that. He didn't do that for 6 months. Johnson's own dossier says he was told this in December 2021. He did not tell MPs that in the House until May 2022. He didn't even correct the record when the police fined him for breaking the actual law, never mind the guidance. So even on the issue of correcting the record, Johnson is arguing a spectacular idiot defence. But the most interesting point made was that Johnson's own dossier makes an admission that he attended the ABBA party. See, up until now, I mean, we all know he did, but up until now, there's been no formal admission. And you may be wondering, well, why is he admitting it now at the end of the process? Because the legal jeopardy is past. It makes no difference legally what he now attended. And the legal jeopardy, at worst, what would happen is the police would order another investigation. Well, that's very unlikely. The Met Police have got their own problems at the moment. But the worst case scenario is they open an investigation into that now that he's admitted it and fine him again. Well, he doesn't care about the fine. You know, the hazard for him right now is not breaking the law, but misleading Parliament. He feels he has to admit to attending multiple law-breaking parties on the same day in order to justify a level of confusion at not understanding questions asked about the parties from MPs and justifying the fact that he's misled them. But coming back to that conclusion from Adam again, he thinks the main danger or saviour for Johnson is this distinction between law and guidance. Boris Johnson told MPs that all guidance was followed completely at 10 Downing Street. However, even his own submissions make clear that nobody believed that the guidance was being followed at all. Though he's presented various recollections that suggest that they thought the rules were being followed but not the guidance. But he didn't admit that until May 2022. So at the very least, he was aware that the guidance wasn't being followed at all times, but still allowed his statement to MPs saying that it had to stand for months. Now that's a breach and should be considered a contempt of Parliament. And I'm also going to add something in terms of my own thoughts as well. So the so-called fourth report, when you read I say when you read, you may not read it, but I'll put the link if you want to read it. He refers to the fourth report. The fourth report is the one that was published by the Privileges Committee a few weeks ago, contains commentary on records handed over by the government in November 2022. Actually, in case of point, there's another thing I just thought. In Boris Johnson's dossier as well, I think quite early on, it's like when half the dossier is him moaning at the committee. And one of his moans is the committee's had like, oh, this inquiry started in April. You've had like loads of months to gather all this evidence. It's like, no, they haven't. Because you didn't hand over the evidence until, well, you didn't. Boris Johnson's government never handed over the evidence. They were asked for it. They never handed it over. It wasn't until Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister that it got handed over. But anyway, Boris Johnson's dossier contains lots of recollections. Not so much in terms of actual records. And then claims in his dossier that people's recollections may not be accurate. No, not at all. So why have you filled your dossier full of them then? You know, that's what his dossier is full of. It's full of, oh, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. Where's the proof? Oh, no, we're not bothering with anything like proof. Doesn't matter. The committee have got the records. The committee have got the records. They don't just rely on memory. But what Johnson's dossier ultimately is comprised of is a load of recollections of officials telling him that they thought the events were within the rules, but not the guidance. To which Johnson thinks he can claim he was not misleading Parliament by saying all rules were followed. But there are two main problems with this defence. The first is that Johnson also explicitly stated that all the guidance was followed. It's not that he was careful just to say rules, guidance. But his own evidence here seems to forget that and shows that he knew that he was not following the guidance as long ago as the end of 2021, if not much earlier. Second is that although Johnson's dossier doesn't contain evidence that people were aware the law wasn't being followed because the lawyer who compiled it is not an idiot, the records that the committee have published tell a different story. I appreciate that there will be technical challenge in this investigation that only skilled lawyers will really appreciate. But the bottom line is, in political terms, the evidence is all there that Johnson clearly lied and continued to lie to Parliament and the public. What's more, you don't have to have followed all this closely to see that. The public know he lied as well. You know, this would be a different matter if the public were falling for it. They're not falling for it. Nobody seriously believes that Johnson is the colossal moron that he is claiming to be. After all, how could you? If you support Boris Johnson, if you desperately want him to be vindicated here, you've got to allow yourself to think he's an imbecile, at which point, why are you supporting him? And if you don't support Boris Johnson, you've got no motivation to make your brain turn somersaults in order to convince yourself that he's not lying every time he moves his mouth. But this is just what comes from his own dossier. There are, of course, other points to discuss, which I'll now have to do in my first video tomorrow ahead of the hearing itself. Until then, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.